Now on the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com. The results show when the athletes hit the field. Joining us from Dave Campbell's Texas Football and texasfootball.com, it's Travis Stewart. How you doing, Travis?
I'm pretty good. How are you, Bryan?
Doing very well. Thank you very much, sir. We talked last week about the NCAA proposing the idea of unlimited contact by text and cell phones and all this other stuff, and talked about what a bad idea it was, and just as we predicted, they went ahead and went with the bad idea. What do you think?
Well, there's certain elements of what they did that were probably good and certain elements of what they did that probably weren't. When the NCAA sat down to, I guess, sketch out what changes they were looking at making, I think it's pretty apparent that their intent was to make lives of college coaches easier, which I can certainly understand and sympathize with, because the college head coach and the college assistant coach, their lives are, well, frankly, they're hell. I mean, they're constantly back and forth, moving from one area to another. They're constantly in touch with kids. They're totally on the road. They're never at home. It's brutal hours. It's a tough life. And I think they were trying to aid them by taking more regulations off their plate, so life became a little less regulated for them, and also by saying that essentially schools can use non-coaches in a recruiting capacity, which means that assistant coaches don't have to shoulder that entire burden. So it definitely will up the quality of life, we believe, for assistants and head coaches, which needed to happen. Unfortunately, I feel like it shifted a lot of the burden to now kids who have to deal with it. And I think one important change out of all of this, and it's the one a lot of people are talking about, but it is big, is the deregulation of communications with kids. Now coaches can have an unlimited amount of Facebook interactions and text messages to kids and so on and so such. And a couple people have rightfully pointed out that, you know, no coach is going to text the kids 400 times in one day. It does you more harm than good. That's probably correct. But opening up all these, or deregulating this whole field, now gives more schools more opportunities. And by proxy, your big-name recruits are going to get more text messages. Maybe not 200 from one coach in a day, but they may get 200 from 100 different coaches on 100 different staffs. And that's really not fair to put a kid in that position either.
And the other thing, too, is that there was a time when the high school coaches were able to kind of monitor some of this stuff. Now that just takes it completely out of the coaches' hands, doesn't it?
More or less. You know, some coaches will be able to continue to keep a tight handle on who has access to their kids, especially at smaller schools. But when you get into the heavy hitters where you may have, like, for example, Skyline in Dallas, where you may have at any given point in time between your sophomores, juniors, and seniors, you may have 20 kids that are going to sign FBS scholarships. And you really can't, you just can't have a handle on all of that all at the same time, especially if it's all deregulated. There's probably just too much happening. So, well, again, I think the underlying principle was, well, this will make life easier for a lot of coaches, and probably rightfully so. It is going to make life more difficult on kids. I firmly believe that, and I know there's some high school coaches here in the area, head coaches here in the DFW area, that think these changes are just, they're borderline insanity. They just make no sense in the quality of life for a kid.
But borderline insanity is what the NCAA is all about most of the time, right?
Well, at least they're consistent, right? and I understand that it's funny, we're so hypocritical, we people these days, because we've been so upset at the NCAA for making this archaic labyrinth rule book where it's really impossible for anyone to navigate with any degree of accuracy. And so we've been calling for efforts to streamline it. Then they streamline it, and we burn down the effort. I mean, that part of that's just people, but part of that is it always befuddles me. The NCAA always seems to make the most curious of decisions, and I guess it just goes back to the fact that the organization as a whole it's an unusual organization to begin with, and so I guess it makes sense that they have unusual rulings as a part of it.
All right, you have an article Greg Tepper wrote on your website having to do with some of the best uncommitted running backs in Texas, one of those being Robert E. Lee's LaQuintus Wallace. And talk a little bit about what the deal is with the shift away from the demand for running backs when Texas used to be known as a running back factory.
Well, I think a big reason why running backs are in hot demand, and this is another topic I wrote about, Bryan, maybe 2 years ago, in a letter from the editor in my winter magazine that talked about how the number of running backs from Texas in the college ranks was going up every year. I think 2 years ago, colleges signed 37 running backs from Texas. I'd have to double-check that number. But part of the reason the running back numbers are going back up again is while the spread offense is obviously still in its heyday, what that means is instead of being a one-back team, you don't have Earl Campbell back there for 50 carries a game. That's an exaggeration. But now you're using 2 to 3 backs. And so a lot of schools are taking more running backs per class. They're utilizing more running backs per game, and the demand has gone up. And when you look at the state of Texas right now, especially areas that have been predominantly heavy in running backs, like San Antonio's always got what seems like at least a dozen who can play for you somewhere. The demand's going to keep going up. The number is probably going to keep going up for the time being, until if we ever get back to an era where colleges rely heavily on one running back for an entire year, almost exclusively.
The one thing I was going to ask you about in relation to that is, do you see a time coming based on what we've seen with the BCS championship game, and you had 2 teams in the championship that were run-heavy football teams, and you also see the Super Bowl now, and you see 2 teams that are, again, pretty run-oriented, smash-mouth kind of football teams. Obviously, they can throw the ball deep and well, but there's a heavy emphasis on running the football. Do you ever see the trend swinging back in the state of Texas in high school to less spread, more balance, more pistol, more of those kinds of things, where you start to see running backs playing a more dominant role in the running games in the offense now, as opposed to the quarterback being the driver right now?
Yes and no. Part of that will be up to a coach's discretion, whereas once upon a time you took your best athletes, you put them at linebacker and corner. Most people take their best athletes and put them at running back and quarterback. But if you look at the title games we just finished in the high school ranks, there already is an inkling of that. I mean, Katy obviously won the D2 title in 5A behind Adam Taylor, who carried a ball almost on average 30 times a game and had well over 2,600 rushing yards on the year. That was a power running attack from the get-go, but they've been that way for a while. Allen, with their running quarterback, the sophomore Kyler Murray, and they had a pretty good running back, Ward, they ran, pistol's not the right term, but it was a run-based offense that also showed some looks of the spread. It was not a pass-first team by any stretch of the imagination. Go down to 4A, Cedar Park was a diversified ground game. I mean, throwing the ball was a rarity for them. They ran it pretty hard. The team they beat in that game was Lancaster, who ran a pistol run-based offense. And in 4A Division I, you had Denton Guyer, which beat Georgetown. Now, Georgetown was a spread passing offense in almost the truest sense of the word. Guyer was a little more balanced, but out of 5A and 4A, 3 of those 4 title games featured big-time run teams. And I think as things are typically cyclical and coaching is a copycat sport, you will see some teams emulate that. But I guess the irony of it is deep down in 1A and 2A, a lot of those schools never changed anyway. A lot of them are still running the same stuff they're running in the 80s and 90s, and that obviously they won't be changing anytime soon. But yes, as you watch, for example, the Harbaugh brothers, I don't want to say dominate the NFL, but make a pretty good run through the NFL, and certain college teams making a pretty good run behind great ground games. Yeah, I think you will see some high school coaches start to emulate that again.
I think you find that the balance is the key. I don't think we're ever going to go back to a time. I mean, I hope we don't ever go back to a time where we're just running the veer, because that was some of the most brutal football to watch. But especially if a team got behind, they just couldn't come back, with that. But you see teams now that have done such a great job of being able to incorporate a high-powered passing attack with that strong running game. The creativity's gotten to be so much better.
And it's had to. You referenced the veer, and when the veer was amazingly, astonishingly innovative at the time.
Yeah.
But the stuff some of the wing tee stuff and slot tee stuff that preceded it and worked around it, while it was very, very good, it relied on a complete and utter dominance in one aspect of the game. And as football has become increasingly public, increasingly profile, increasingly diversified, and it starts to attract more and more great minds every year, it becomes more and more difficult to pin your game plan upon dominating in one particular aspect of a football game and thinking that's going to win. It just doesn't happen anymore unless you truly have 22 kids that are better than the other 22 and your coach is smarter as well. It's not a commonality now. It's kind of like what we'd seen with the NFL for a while. The NFL, when we say pro style, what that essentially means is balance, right? They both throw and they run the ball. And the NFL has been in pro style a lot longer than high school and college has because it's got the brightest minds and the best players. You can't afford to be one-dimensional. And as a lot of the importance and I guess dollars in college and football trickles down through college and the high school ranks, it becomes more and more important to win, and therefore you have to have those sharp minds who can play balanced football.
Okay, so now let's talk about the magazine. The Winter Magazine is, I know you're taking pre-orders for it. When is it going to hit the stands?
Honestly, it might be today, depending on
good.
where you are. It's either today, tomorrow, Friday. Our distribution centers are scattered throughout the state, and so it just takes time for it to get to one area or another. We are still taking orders online. We'll be happy to take them as long as people want to send them online, and then we'll just mail them straight from the office. But if you like the experience of going out and buying off the rack, which I can sympathize with, you can start looking today, but it'd probably be best to wait till tomorrow or maybe Friday before you can expect to go out and find it.
And what are some of the things that we need to be looking forward to in this magazine?
Well, obviously, Johnny Manziel on the cover is a big one, and a lot of people have been talking about that one. That was not like that was a big shocker to anyone by any stretch of the imagination, but we wanted to make this one a special edition, a collectible, and we tried to do that with the Robert Griffin Heisman book last year. We think we did a good job. This year we had a sponsor, an Academy step up, and want to really broaden out the presence for Manziel and for the Heisman, and as a response, we have a pull-out poster, which I used to love as a kid. I mean, pull-out posters in magazines they drove me mental. I couldn't handle them. I was so excited to get one. We also put together a photo section on Manziel's career, and that was really the approach to the story on Manziel in this book. Was we don't want to try and place his legacy in a box now and try and figure out where he fits into the scheme of things, because we've got a couple years probably after this to do that. So the point for the Manziel focus in this magazine was, what were the steps that led to this point? How did we get to now? How did we get to the first ever freshman Heisman winner? And we built a photo section that essentially walks you through his career to date through photos. And we were really pleased with how that came out. We think just the emotion of the photos tells his story pretty well in conjunction with the great writing that we have from the great writers around Texas.
Yeah, and you still got 3 more chapters to go with this, we think, if he stays for 3 more years, too.
Yeah, and I was always a guy who thought he was going to hang around for the whole 4 years, and a lot of people have started disagreeing with me.
I know.
And I'm beginning to think that there's a nugget of truth in that when you watch these quarterbacks in the NFL who are so diverse, and you're beginning to realize that size may not be everything, because Johnny's not tall. I'm taller than Johnny, and the NFL coaches will not even take a half a second look at me. But what Russell Wilson, you hate to pin everything on one player, but what Russell Wilson did this year for the Seahawks really has to make you wonder what good coaching can do for a quarterback who doesn't meet the prototypical size requirements. And if there's any bit of Russell Wilson and Johnny in the NFL level, and if coaches think that there is, they're going to go after him in the draft. And if coaches are going after him in the draft, then it'll be very tough for him to stay for all 4 years and avoid that NFL money.
And I'm not sure that he's not more athletic than Russell Wilson is.
I think he is. And a lot of people, I'm not going to open up a can of worms here, but a lot of people what's the word I'm looking for? They underrate Johnny's athleticism. And it's outrageous.
I don't know how you can underrate that if you watch the kid.
Yeah, I don't know either. And we were joking, some buddies of mine were joking when the new NCAA comes out, we wonder what his speed rating will be, if you ever play those video games, because he was one of, if not the fastest player I saw on a field this year in college football.
Oh, yeah.
And in the main feature for this Winter magazine is the coach who recruited him at A&M, who is no longer there, but he talked about how his athleticism was so underrated and his speed was so underrated. And you watch him play, be it in person or over the TV or whatever, and you can see his athleticism's off the charts. He's very, very difficult to bring down the open field. He's tough to get an angle. For heaven's sakes, Bob Stoops, and I don't know how much of this is hyperbole, Bob Stoops said he was the toughest quarterback to game plan against he's ever coached against. And that should put things in perspective, since he coached against the guys like Vince Young and guys like Colt McCoy and some of the biggest names we've had come through the state in a long time.
Yeah, go ask Nick Saban about him.
Yeah, tell me about it, right? They had a heck of a time with him, and if he keeps getting better, who knows? He may be at his ceiling now. I doubt it. If he keeps getting better, he's going to be a bear out there. He's going to be really tough to handle.
If you're an Aggie fan, these are the salad days right now. There's no question about that.
These will be some of the best football days you'll ever enjoy, because the way I listed in the Winter magazine that we just published was A&M's on a recruiting heater right now, and that's what they are. I mean, almost everyone they want they're getting right now, and they've got players in the field. They've got a coach in the cupboard who knows what he's doing, and they've got kids who want to come play there. You honestly can't ask for anything more. That is the mecca for football.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks very much, Travis. We appreciate it as always, and we look forward to seeing the magazine when it's on the stands.
Thanks, Bud. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Travis Stewart, the managing editor of Dave Campbell's Texas Football and TexasFootball.com on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM.